The moment I heard her voice on the other end of the line, I knew something had gone wrong. She was not crying. She was not upset. She was furious, the kind of furious that does not shake, the kind that goes very, very still. "There is a hold on the account," my daughter-in-law said to someone at the bank. Her voice came through my kitchen window because she had called my son first and he had not hung up properly. "What do you mean a hold? That money is supposed to be available. We need it transferred today." I set down my coffee cup very slowly. 3 days before that phone call, she had stood in my living room with her arms crossed and told me, "You need to stop inserting yourself into our decisions. This is our family, not yours." And now she was at the bank trying to move money from an account she had no legal right to touch. She did not know yet that I had already made one phone call. She did not know that my attorney, a quiet man named Mr. Hargrove, who wore the same brown cardigan every time I visited his office, had added a security flag to the account the morning after her little speech in my living room. She did not know any of that yet, but she was about to find out. My name is Vivian Marsh. I am 64 years old. I have arthritis in my left hand, and I still make pie crust from scratch because my mother taught me that shortcuts ruin the texture. I live in the house where I raised my son, a cream-colored colonial with green shutters on a quiet street in Ohio. My husband Leonard passed away 6 years ago, and since then, the two people who matter most to me in this world are my son Nathan and my granddaughter Lily. Lily is 9 years old. She has her father's eyes and her grandfather's laugh, this big rolling laugh that fills up a room the way sunlight fills up a window in the morning. She loves horses and strawberry ice cream, and she is convinced that if she practices hard enough, she will one day be an Olympic swimmer. I believe her. I have always believed her. Leonard and I started saving for Lily the month she was born. We did not call it anything fancy. We just put money aside, carefully, steadily, the way people who grew up without much learn to do. After Leonard was diagnosed, we sat down with Mr. Lily Hargrove and made it official, a custodial account set up so that Lily would have access when she turned 21, not before. The money was for her education, for her start in life, for whatever she needed when she was old enough to know what she needed. Nathan knew about the account. He had always known. His wife, Pamela, I need to think of a different name. I called her something different in my head anyway. She came into our lives 4 years ago, a year before Leonard died. She was charming in the beginning, quick with a compliment, always dressed beautifully, always seemed to know the right thing to say. I liked her at first. I genuinely did. But after the wedding, things changed in small ways I could not quite put into words. Nathan stopped calling on Sundays. He started apologizing for things he had never apologized for before, for how often I visited, for the fact that I had opinions, for taking Lily to the park without asking first. Little things. But little things add up. My daughter-in-law, I will call her Sandra here because that is not her name, and she will never read this anyway. Sandra began mentioning money about a year into the marriage, not loudly, subtly, the way people do when they want something but do not want to be caught wanting it. She would say things like, "It must be nice to have financial security while looking at my house," or, "Lily is so lucky to have a grandmother who set money aside," with a smile that did not reach her eyes. The first time she mentioned the account directly, Lily was sitting right there at the kitchen table, colouring a picture of a horse. Sandra leaned over and said, very casually, "You know, Vivian, that money is just sitting there. Nathan and I have been looking at investment opportunities. We could grow it significantly." I looked at my son. He was looking at his coffee. I said, very carefully, "That money is for Lily's future. It is not available for investment." Sandra smiled. "Plans can be adjusted." I went home that evening and called Mr. Hargrove, not because I thought anything would happen right away, but because the cold feeling I got in my chest during that conversation told me to stop trusting that everything would be fine on its own. He told me what I needed to do to make the security flag permanent. I did it. Over the next several months, Sandra brought it up 4 more times. Each time a little less subtle than before. Each time Nathan said nothing. I started to understand that silence as its own kind of answer. Then came the afternoon, 3 days before Sandra called the bank. They showed up without warning. Sandra walked in first. Nathan hung back near the door like he was not sure whether he wanted to be there. Lily was not with them. Sandra did not sit down. "We need to be clear about something," she said. "You have been interfering in decisions that are not yours to make. You insert yourself into our finances, our parenting, our plans. It stops now." I kept my voice even. "I do not interfere. I set up an account for my granddaughter before her grandfather died. That is not interference." "It is control," she said. "You use that account to control us, to make us come to you, to make us feel like we owe you something." That stung more than I expected. Nathan cleared his throat. "Mom," he said, "maybe if you just gave us a little more flexibility with the account, not take it, just adjust the terms, things would feel less tense." Adjust the terms. He had never talked that way before. I wondered how long she had been working on that phrasing with him. "No," I said. Sandra's eyes hardened. "Then stay out of our lives. Stop giving advice. Stop dropping by. Stop acting like Lily is yours." She left. Nathan followed without looking at me. I sat in my chair for a long time after they were gone. Then I called Mr. Hargrave and told him I wanted the highest level of notification possible. If anyone attempted to move, access, or transfer anything in that account without my written authorization, I wanted to know within the hour. He asked if I was worried about something specific. "Not yet," I said, "but I want to be ready." 2 days later, my phone rang at 10 in the morning. It was Mr. Hargrave. "Vivian," he said, "I need you to come in." Sandra had gone to the bank that morning. She had brought documentation, account numbers, identity verification, a letter that had Nathan's name on it. She had tried to initiate a transfer. "How much?" I asked. Mr. Hargrave paused. "The full balance," he said, "minus a small minimum to keep the account open." I had to put my hand flat on the kitchen table to steady myself. That account had taken Leonard and me over a decade to build. Extra shifts, Christmas bonuses set aside untouched, a small inheritance from my mother that I'd never spent because I always thought it belonged to whoever came after us. Sandra had tried to take all of it in a single morning visit to a bank. "She cannot do that," I said. "She cannot," Mr. Hargrave confirmed. The flag held. "But Vivian, this was not impulsive. She had paperwork. She had prepared for this." I thanked him, hung up, and sat very still. Then Nathan called. "Mum." His voice was unsteady. "The bank called us. They said the account is flagged. They said there was a security hold." "Yes," I said. "Why would you do that?" "Because your wife just tried to transfer every dollar your daughter's grandfather saved for her." A long silence. "It was going to go back," he said. "We just needed it temporarily." That sentence broke something open in me, not with anger, with something closer to grief. "Come over tonight," I said, "alone." He came. He looked like he had not slept. He sat at my kitchen table, the same table where he had done homework every night in middle school, and he told me the truth. Not all at once. In pieces, the way people tell you things they are ashamed of. Sandra had convinced him to invest in a business opportunity a friend of hers had introduced them to, a franchise she had called it, a sure thing. They had put in their savings, then more. Then they had borrowed from a private lender to cover the second round of required investment. The business had never opened, the franchise company was not returning calls, and now they owed $68,000 to a man Nathan described as not patient. "She thought if we could just cover the debt," Nathan said, staring at the table, "we could put the money back before Lily ever knew." Put it back. Like Lily's future was a jar they had borrowed flour from. "How long have you known this was falling apart?" I asked. 3 months, he whispered. 3 months of Sandra standing in my living room talking about control and interference while they were planning to steal from a 9-year-old child. "I want you to listen to me carefully," I said. "I love you. I have loved you every day of your life, but that money belongs to Lily, not to your mistakes, not to Sandra's decisions. It is not available, not temporarily, not partially, not ever, without Lily's own consent when she is 21. He did not argue. He looked too tired to argue. "Who did you borrow from?" I asked. He gave me a name and a company. I wrote it down. "And the franchise?" He slid his phone across the table. I looked at the company name and the website. Something felt off the moment I saw it. The photographs were too polished. The testimonials had no last names. The address on the contact page was a mailbox service downtown. I wrote that down too. After he left, I could not sleep. I sat up until 2 a.m. thinking about Lily. About whether this man, this not patient private lender, knew about the account. About whether Nathan had mentioned it. About what might happen next. In the morning, I called a woman I have known for 30 years, a retired county clerk named Beverly who still has connections and still, out of friendship, makes certain calls she does not have to make. I told her the company name Nathan had given me. I asked her to look into it quietly. By noon, she called me back. Vivian, she said, that company has 3 complaints filed against it in 2 counties. The State Attorney General's office opened an inquiry 6 weeks ago. This is not a franchise operation, it is a scheme. They take the initial investment, request a second round, and then disappear. Are they still operating? I asked. The office address is empty, she said, but the people behind it are still around. I thanked her and sat with that information for a while. Then Sandra called. Her voice was measured this time, controlled, the way a person sounds when they have rehearsed what they are going to say. Vivian, I think we need to talk like adults. I agree, I said. The bank hold is an overreaction, she said. We were not stealing. We needed a bridge loan. Temporary. Nathan should have told you about the situation instead of letting it go this far. He told me last night, I said. Everything. A pause. Then you understand the position we are in. I understand the position we are in. I understand the position you put yourselves in, I said. I also understand that the company you invested in is currently under investigation for fraud. Another pause. Longer this time. That is not confirmed, she said carefully. It will be, I replied. Her tone shifted, not to anger this time, to something that felt like a warning wrapped in calm. Vivian, if this becomes a legal matter, if the lender files a judgment, if this ends up in court records, it will become public. People talk. Nathan's employer does background checks on financial matters. This could affect his job. That possibility, I said, exists because of the choices you made, not because of mine. She hung up. I stood in my kitchen for a moment, and then I did something I had not done in a long time. I went to my front window and looked out at the street. There was a grey sedan parked half a block down. It had been there when Nathan left the night before. It was still there now. Maybe it meant nothing. Maybe it meant something. I called Mr. Hargrove and told him everything, the investment, the lender, Beverly's information, the conversation with Sandra. He listened without interrupting. This is more serious than a family disagreement, he said when I finished. If the lender is connected to the investigation, and if Nathan disclosed the existence of this account to them as a way to buy time, you may receive contact from people who are not connected to your family. I told him about the grey sedan. He told me to document it. Write down the time, the date, the make, the colour. Take a photograph if I could do it without being obvious. That evening I did. The next morning, the sedan was gone. But there was an envelope tucked under the edge of my front doormat. No stamp. No return address. Just my name written on the front in block letters. Vivian Marchage. Inside was a single index card. The account should be released. Delays create complications for everyone. No signature. No threat stated directly. Just that sentence. That smooth, reasonable-sounding sentence that was somehow more frightening than a threat would have been. My hands were steady when I called Mr. Hargrove. I'm not sure why they were steady. Maybe because by then I had already made up my mind. I want to go to the police, I said. I was going to suggest that, he said. I drove to the station that afternoon and asked to speak to a detective. I was put in a small room with a woman named Detective Okafor who had calm eyes and took very good notes. I told her everything. The investment, the debt, the attempted withdrawal, the envelope, the sedan. I gave her the index card in a Ziploc bag, the way my neighbour, a retired nurse, had told me to handle anything that might be evidence. Detective Okafor read the card. She looked at me. Mrs. Rockefeller read the card. Marsh, she said, the company name you mentioned, we have an open file on them. Several families have reported similar situations. The people connected to this operation have a pattern of using family members' assets as leverage. My son told them about the account, I said. I did not say it with anger, just with the plain weight of it. That is consistent with how they operate, she said. They encourage borrowers to identify available assets. It makes the borrower feel like they have a path forward. It also gives the lenders something to point to later. What happens now? I asked. We contact the task force that is already working this case, she said, and you do not release anything, not a dollar, not a signature, nothing. I was not going to, I said. She almost smiled. I know, she said, I can tell. That night, Nathan called again. He had heard from Sandra that I had gone to the police. Mum. His voice was strained. This is going to make everything worse. Nathan, I said. Men who leave anonymous notes under elderly women's doormats are not going to become reasonable because you ask them nicely. The police are the right call. Sandra is scared, he said. She should be, I said. But not of me. He was quiet for a moment. Were you scared? He asked. When you found the note? Yes, I said honestly. But I was more scared of what would happen if I stayed quiet. 3 days later, Detective Okafor called me. The franchise company's principals had been located. One had already attempted to cross state lines. Search warrants had been executed at 2 addresses connected to the lending operation. The grey sedan, it turned out, was registered to a man with a prior record for financial fraud. No one came to my door again. Nathan came to see me that weekend. He sat at the kitchen table and this time he cried. Not quietly, properly. The way a person cries when they have been holding something too tightly for too long and they finally let it go. I let her convince me, he said, that you were the problem, that your caution was the obstacle, that if you would just trust us. I do trust you, I said. I do not trust panic. She was ashamed, he said. When it started going wrong, she was too ashamed to tell anyone. So she looked for a way to fix it quietly, and the only quiet option she could see was Lily's account. And when that was not available, I said gently, she pointed people toward it without realizing what she was pointing them toward. He nodded. Is she going to be all right? I asked. I surprised myself by meaning it. She is scared, he said. The police interviewed her for 3 hours. What did she tell them? Everything, he said. The whole story. How they were recruited, what they were promised, every conversation with the lender. Good, I said. That is the only thing that protects her now. He reached across the table and put his hand over mine. His hands are big like his father's. I have always noticed that. She tried to take Lily's future, he said quietly. I know that. I know it was wrong. I knew it was wrong when we were doing it and I did not stop it. I know, I said. How do you forgive something like that? I thought about it seriously before I answered. You start by being honest about what it was, I said, not minimizing it, not calling it a loan or a bridge or a temporary fix. It was wrong. And then you rebuild from the honest version of it, not the comfortable one. He stayed for dinner. We ate leftovers and talked about Lily's swim meet and whether she was too young to start thinking about competitive coaching, normal things, real things. A month later, the task force announced formal charges against the principals of the franchise company and several individuals connected to the lending operation. 11 families had been affected. Nathan and Sandra were not charged. They had been victims of the scheme, documented thoroughly, fully cooperative. But there were consequences all the same. Nathan's employer required him to complete a financial ethics course and disclose the investigation in his annual review. It did not cost him his job, but it cost him something. He knew it. He did not pretend otherwise. Sandra's cousin, the one who had introduced them to the franchise opportunity, who had vouched for it, who had received a referral fee for bringing them in, was named in the charges as a participant. Sandra had not known that part. When she found out, she sat in my kitchen and cried in a way that was nothing like her usual composure. I gave her tea and did not say anything unkind because she already knew. I thought he was trying to help us, she said. People who love fast money often believe they are helping, I said. She looked up at me. I owe you an apology that I do not know how to make big enough. Start with a small one, I said, and mean it. She did. It was not comfortable, but it was honest, which is worth more. The account remains untouched. Lily does not know any of this happened. She knows that her grandfather set money aside for her, and she knows that it will be there when she is ready for it. She does not need to know the rest, not yet. One day, when she is older, I will tell her that her future was protected, that it was the most important thing, even when protecting it was hard. She came over last Saturday and we made pie together. She stood on the step stool Leonard built for Nathan when Nathan was small because Lily is not quite tall enough to reach the counter comfortably without it. She rolled the dough with great seriousness and too much flour, and the crust was slightly thick on one side, and it was the best pie I have had in years. "Grandma," she said, pressing the fork tines along the edge to seal it, "when I am a swimmer in the Olympics, will you come to watch?" "I will be in the front row," I said. She grinned. "Even if you are really old?" "Especially then," I said. "Nathan comes by on Sundays now. Sometimes Sandra comes too. It is not the same as before any of this happened. It is not as easy or as unexamined, but it is real, and I think real is better than easy in the long run. I have thought a lot about what Sandra said that afternoon in my living room, that I used the account to control them, that my caution was a form of dominance. I understand why she felt that way. I do not think she was lying about how it felt to her, but I also know that a 9-year-old girl has a grandfather who worked overtime for years so she could have something solid to stand on when she grows up. And it was not mine to give away. It was not Nathan's to borrow, and it was certainly not Sandra's to take. There are people who will call a grandmother's steadiness interference. They will call her caution control. They will tell her to stay in her lane, to trust the process, to stop inserting herself. And sometimes the most loving answer to all of that is simply no. Not because you do not trust them, not because you want to punish them, but because someone has to stay steady when the people you love cannot see clearly. Someone has to remember who the money is for. Someone has to be willing to be the obstacle when the alternative is watching a child lose something they do not even know they have yet. Lily's account is still there. Every dollar, untouched. And that step stool Leonard built is still in my kitchen, waiting for her to grow into it. I have thought about this whole thing many times since it ended. Not obsessively, I am past that. But the way you think about a scar that has healed cleanly, you press it sometimes just to remember what it felt like. What I keep coming back to is this. Sandra was not a villain in the way people want their villains to be. She did not set out to harm Lily. She set out to escape embarrassment. And that, I think, is where so many of the worst decisions in life actually begin. Not from cruelty, but from the desperation of someone who cannot bear to be seen failing. She and Nathan had made a terrible financial choice. And instead of sitting with the discomfort of admitting that, instead of coming to me and saying, "We made a mistake, we need help," she looked for a door that was already open. She had convinced herself, and I believe she truly had, that Lily's account was a kind of family resource, that the line between what was Lily's and what was theirs was blurry enough to step across just once, quietly, and then step back, before anyone noticed. That is what unchecked pride does. It does not announce itself. It reframes things. It turns someone else's future into a temporary loan. It turns a grandmother's caution into control. It finds the most convenient story and lives inside it until the story stops holding. What I learned from all of this, what I carry forward, is that steadiness is its own form of love. It is not the warm kind. It is not the kind that makes you feel good about yourself in the moment. When I said no to Nathan, when I refused to adjust the terms, when I called Mr. Hargrove after Sandra walked out of my living room, none of that felt heroic. It felt lonely. It felt like being the difficult one. It felt like choosing a principle over keeping the peace. But the peace that would have come from releasing that account was not real peace. It was silence purchased at Lily's expense. And Lily did not have a voice in any of it. She was 9 years old, rolling pie crust on a step stool her grandfather built. She had no idea that the adults around her were making decisions that would shape what her life looked like at 21. That is exactly why someone had to stay clear-headed when everyone else was panicking. Integrity is not something you perform for an audience. It is what you do when the only person watching is yourself. I had no guarantee the account would be threatened when I first called Mr. Hargrove. I just had a feeling and a responsibility, and acting on that feeling, quietly, without drama, without announcing it, is the thing that protected Lily in the end. Nathan is rebuilding. Sandra is more honest with herself than she used to be. Neither of those things happened because everything went smoothly. They happened because the consequences were real and unavoidable. People grow in the places where they cannot hide anymore. If you are a parent, a grandparent, anyone who has set something aside for someone you love, protect it with the same seriousness as the love itself. Do not let guilt move you. Do not let pressure masquerade as reason. The people who love you will understand eventually, and the ones who only needed access to what you had, you will understand them better too once the dust clears. Lily's stepstool is still in my kitchen. Her future is still intact, and some mornings that is enough to make me feel like Leonard and I did something right.